Best laid plans in a trash compactor. Nuisance factor, nuisance factor. Can't get herpes from a tractor. Nuisance factor, nuisance factor. In the way of what you're after. Nuisance factor, nuisance factor, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, hello, Adam Rowe.
Well, hello, Boris guys.
How you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm very good myself.
Good.
Who do we have with us today?
We have our friend Nick Edwards with us today, and I didn't mangle his name this time.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yep. I'm so easily offended when people mangle Edwards. It happens all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Just people in America have a hard time pronouncing that last name.
You'd be surprised how often people mispronounce my last name Rowe.
Really?
Rowie. Is Mr. Rui here? Like, really? Is it that tough a name? It's 4 letters, for heaven's sake.
That's amazing. I don't have that problem personally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. I'm sure people nail yours all the time.
Well, the good news is I don't know how to pronounce mine, right? They just arbitrarily assigned a pronunciation to it when we first arrived. All right. So we chatted a little bit prior to this about what we might want to talk about. And of course, what we want to talk about is religion and morality and all those fun things that we've never discussed before and are totally new topics to us.
Can I ask you a quick question just regarding the show in general?
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, Boris and I have a little bit of a podcasting history going back to 15 years?
Yeah.
I never asked you this, and I'm sorry that I didn't, but thematically, what are you shooting for with this show? Is it a philosophy show? I mean, I've listened to most of your shows now, but I wanted to kind of get your take on that before we get going.
I mean, it's more just Boris and Adam chatting.
Okay.
Show. Because we chat a lot outside of the show, and we really felt like maybe there's something to those chats, and so we wanted to kind of share them with everybody.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of an ego trip on my part, at least, but I also, it's fulfilling in a way, rather than just kind of sending it off to the abyss.
Yeah, Boris and I would have these really in-depth conversations that would just sometimes go on for hours and for years and years on end. And finally, we were like, we need to record this or something. I mean, my gosh. So that's
I think it's fascinating if you ever do it to go back. Especially when you have something that it's one thing to maybe keep a journal or have memories of conversations that you had with people, but to go back and to listen to how your way of thinking has changed over the course of your life, I think is a fascinating exercise. So if nothing else, at least you'll have that documented.
For sure.
Yeah. The other thing for me, at least, has been that, listening back to some of these episodes, I can see how, it becomes really obvious how dumb some of my arguments are.
But I mean, I think there's value in that too.
100%. Yeah. That's the greatest value. It's, it allows you to self-reflect. And I've made some really, really bad arguments on this show so far.
It's funny how in our memories, we only remember how brilliant we are and seem to forget the things that weren't so brilliant. So this is nice to have that mirror to remind ourselves that we don't know everything.
Exactly.
It's like we say in the music industry, the tape does not lie.
That's right. So
what do you got for us today? What's on tap?
So today we want to talk a little bit about your respective beliefs. And the reason why this topic is particularly interesting to me is that I've had these discussions with both of you guys for many years. And I feel like you are both sort of in the same camp, and it's not the camp that I'm in. And yet somehow it seems to me that you guys shouldn't be in the same camp. It seems like there's so much difference between your approaches to your faith that to me they don't seem like they're reconcilable. Okay. And so I would like to, I think that by engaging you guys in this discussion, I will learn quite a bit. And as you know, recently I've been struggling with what I perceive to be my own dogma on the subject of religion. I've been an atheist for many years now, and I've kind of fallen into just reciting a lot of the mantras that you've heard me recite probably, countless times, and I'm sure, Adam has certainly. And I want to shake myself of that. I want to try to be a little bit more open-minded about the subject. And, who knows if conversion's in my future, so be it. But I'm certainly I'm trying to be open to everything.
But if you don't mind me asking real quick since you mentioned it, just so I know what we're going into, what are your preconceptions about where our differences may be? And I don't fault you for having that opinion. Yeah. I probably would too.
Well, one thing I found is that, in all the years of having conversations with Christians and, Bible believers, it's been a lot easier to sort of refute some of their, assertions. It's been easier to dismiss a lot of their assertions, you included, Nick. I mean, and that's probably because you have this framework to which you adhere. You reference the Bible. The Bible has its own problems. So it was easy for me to kind of pick those things apart and throw them at you and kind of dismiss your entire case. Mm-hmm. Then when I met Adam, Adam claims to also have faith in the same God that you have faith in. Mm-hmm. But he's not necessarily bound by these strictures. Like, he's not constrained by the Bible. He's not constrained by the notion of, contradicting himself. Mm-hmm. And you'll find this out as we go along. And so what that does is also he's read a lot of philosophy. I'm sorry I'm speaking for you, but he's asking me sort of where I'm coming from on this. And so for me, like, Adam seems like the sort of person who's already been through what I've been through, in the sense that he started out religious, he lost his faith, he became an atheist, he made the same arguments that I'm making to him now to other people. He's come out on the other side with this really nuanced and rich sort of philosophy with respect to his God. And so, yeah, so does that answer your question? So it's throwing me for a loop, because the same arguments that I used against Christians in the past, they don't fly here. Okay. He's not constricted by, what the Bible says God is. That does not matter. So it's been very difficult for me to kind of even wrap my head around what he believes and how he comes around to it. So that's another thing. I'm very curious to see how you respond to some of his ideas on the subject. Okay, gotcha. All right. So that being said, we do have a little bit of a loose outline that I want to follow today, and I want to start with the question of faith. And I want to know, for each of you, we'll start with Adam. What is your what is how would you describe your faith in God? What is the most concise statement of that you can make?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that I believe that religion always operates on two levels. I've discussed this on our podcast before, and that would be the exoteric level, which is the level of organized religion, which is the level of political religion, which is the forms, the signs, the ideas that are provided to the masses, and which essentially can be almost indistinguishable from just raw political power, just in a different stance. And then there's the esoteric operation of religion, which is personal, it's subjective. In many cases, it's a secret teaching. But the esoteric aspect is the personal ego's attempt to make contact with the metaphysic, or to make contact with God, or to transcend himself and to transcend the material universe, the universe of phenomenon. So for me, religion always coexists on these two co-equal levels that are always operating on me. So exoterically, in the sense of organized religion, I'm a Christian, and my beliefs can be summed up by the words of the Nicene Creed. Esoterically, I have a lot of ideas. Some of them are very, very firm. Some of them are constantly evolving and a bit more fluid. But the essentials of my esoteric beliefs are that God is real, that God is the cause of all chains of cause and effect in the universe, that God is eternal, that the human soul is eternal and is also somehow deeply and perfectly connected to God from the beginning, and that finally that the individual soul will be judged in eternity by this God, and that judgment will have eternal significance. Those are the things that I absolutely believe esoterically.
Okay. And then, so as far as your exoteric beliefs today, so that's esoterically. God
exoteric is the sense of organized religion. For me, that's the Episcopal Church. That's what I was raised in.
Okay. Now, you mentioned previously to me the Nicene Creed.
Right.
And so how does that tie into your belief structure?
Well, the Nicene Creed, of course, was formulated at the Council of Nicaea, I believe, in 350 A.D. I think it was in the reign of Justinian, but David could probably correct me on that. I may be wrong about the emperor. It was before Constantine, though. But the words of the Nicene Creed, I think, are the most succinct, statement of sort of primordial Christian theology. We, of course, recited it constantly in the Episcopal Church when I was a child. It goes something like this. Boris has got an actual transcript, so we're going to see if I actually remember it, but I believe it goes, "We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all that is seen and unseen. We believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, eternally begotten of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one being with the Father. Through him all things were made. For us and for our salvation he came down from heaven. By the power of the Holy Spirit he became incarnate from the Virgin Mary and was made man. For our sake he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered death and was buried. On the third day he rose again in accordance with the Scriptures. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son. With the Father and the Son he's worshipped and glorified. He has spoken through the prophets. We believe in one holy Catholic and apostolic church. We acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. We look for the resurrection of the dead and the light in the world to come." Is that right?
Amen.
Amen.
Indeed.
That is impressive.
Yeah, very impressive.
I've said it a lot of times. And of course, you know what amen means?
Truthfully, truly, or
No.
what does it mean?
Amen is a Hebraization of Amun, which was the late Egyptian sun god.
So what does it mean?
It's an invocation to the sun, Amun.
So it's pagan in origin?
Absolutely.
What?
As is almost
Did you know that?
huge
My
portions of
understanding was that
Christianity.
the Hebrew word did mean truth. And maybe it
Well,
had
the-
originated
That's how it was
from.
taught to me, I thought. But
I don't
Amun.
speak Hebrew though, so that's my disclaimer on that.
It's Amun. It comes from
Wow.
the late Egyptian sun god. In the early kingdom, it was Ra, but in the later Egyptian kingdoms,
Well,
it was
those
Amun.
Hebrews did spend a lot of time in Egypt, so wouldn't
All right.
be. The,
So-
the calf had something to do with that too, I think.
not to belabor the point, but could you just very quickly also explain what is the connection for you between your esoteric belief and your exoteric belief? How are these two recitations related to each other?
My exoteric beliefs, as expressed through the Nicene Creed that I just recited, are objects of faith to me. They're not rational objects. These are spiritual, metaphysical principles that I approach, that I interact with, and that I think about on spiritual grounds only. I don't. There's a lot of the literal statements of Christian theology that which are impossible for me to believe rationally, and I think that's a whole part of the scheme of faith, because I think what faith is really the opposite of reason. Faith is what allows the human ego to transcend reason and to stick its tongue out at reason and to go further and to find a metaphysic. That's what it is. How does that relate to my esoteric belief systems? I look at it mostly as a gateway. I don't see how you could even develop the mind to have or to approach or to attempt an initiation in an esoteric spiritual life without first being introduced through the exoteric forms of religion. I think we've discussed that before.
Yeah, we have. So, yeah, there's a few other questions that I have that I want to circle back around after I kind of get Nick's take.
Okay.
So, Nick, a similar question to you, but maybe you could frame it in as a response to what Adam is saying. So would you address your belief system from both the esoteric, the deeply personal, the deeply subjective, and the exoteric, the external, the worldly, the political, etc.?
Well, you may recall from, and I know it was quite a while ago, that my journey has not been too different than Adam's. I used to be what I call an evangelizing atheist. I wasn't just I hate my parents atheist. I was you need to believe atheism, and I've got a lot of very good reasons why you should do it. So I kind of come from that world too.
Right.
And in the simplest terms, I'll phrase it slightly differently, but I think I'm pretty much saying the same thing that Adam said as well, as far as esoteric. And these are new words for me. I mean, I knew the words, but you guys use them a lot, so I want to make sure I'm getting them right. Exoteric is the religious practice part of it, right? For lack of it.
Organized religion.
Esoteric is what your own experience with whatever the divine.
Correct. It can also mean a secret teaching, an oral teaching, but when I use it, I mean a subjective experience of metaphysics.
Okay. So for me, my faith experience has gone from, I mean, no matter which side of the coin you fall on, in my estimation, you've got faith of one way or another. But before, I was a Christian, then I was I don't think I was ever really a Christian, because before I was an atheist, I was just going through the motions. I didn't really even know what it meant to be a Christian, despite being in church my whole life. So when I became an atheist, my faith shifted from, I'll just say nothing, because if you would have asked me, I would have probably not even had an answer. I hadn't pondered it, but I was young, up before high school, before I really went down the atheism road. my faith was that there is absolutely nothing other than materialism. That was it. There's no way of knowing that. So for a certain degree, I had faith that that's just the way that things were. And I put all my faith in that. I put my faith in my own ability to succeed, my own ability to bring into my life all the things that I thought would make me happy and give me joy and give me purpose. And I feel like I came pretty close, if not entirely wrapping my hands around those things at one point or another, very close to doing it, close enough to realize that this is not the feeling that I thought I would get from attaining all of these things. And the last thing I wanted to do through that whole experience was say, well, it must have something to do with Jesus. I mean, because it just wasn't a part of my being. I mean, I'd been kicking against the goads for so long in that I was just unwilling to do it. And that brought me all the way to the point literally of riding that train into the ground almost to death. And I thought, well, I have tried everything else and nothing is getting me anywhere closer to finding purpose and meaning and happiness in my life. Let me turn back to this Jesus thing. And at that point, it wasn't like, bring me to church. It wasn't like that at all for me. It was more like, I'm now open to it. Let me see what some of these people that I respect that say they're Christians have to say. And my whole thing was I knew a lot of people that said they were Christians. And one of the big reasons why I turned away is I would ask people that I thought should have had appropriate answers for a skeptic or an atheist, and the answers were beyond ludicrous. I mean, they weren't even barely reasonable. I mean, these were guys that were teaching Sunday school, leading big churches. In my opinion, when I would ask the questions, I thought, that's really what you believe? You're an adult thinking person that believes things like that? And I still honestly feel that way about some of these answers that these guys were giving me, which is not a statement about them as people, but a state of the education of people that are directing people's spiritual lives and thereby their entire decision-making process through the course of their lives, which gives you a hint on how I feel about the exoteric portion of it. Now, after exploring lots of things, getting different opinions about all kinds of things, reading different things, talking to different people, having different types of life experiences, looking through different types of lens instead of the materialist, secularist lens, looking through it of a lens of there may be a metaphysic, which I think to anyone who's listening to this, I didn't know what that meant either, but I could tell by the context of it. I mean, I know what metaphysics is, but I think you're talking about just the more nebulous, the things that we can't see that we might have faith could be
Correct.
out there.
Anything, when I use the term metaphysic, especially in these conversations, I use it to mean something that is real but is absolutely outside of the physical universe, that cannot be apprehended as part of the physical universe. That's
and I would say in the loosest terms, and I'm sure we'll drill down to this a little bit more, that is where my faith has pivoted to. I believe now more likely that there is something out there, a God, than that there isn't, which is where I was before.
I see.
And that has led me to, and a lot of, dogmatism is a big deal in Christianity. I don't agree with dogmatism. I never have. I'm very turned off by it. I'm upset by the fact that there are so many factions of denominations, many who don't like each other, will talk trash about each other. I think when we really boil down to it, which I'm sure we probably will today, the organized church on the whole has not been a big benefit to Christianity. You can make an argument that it's been a big benefit to the world. They do all kinds of wondrous, benevolent things for lots and lots of people. But I would say the one thing that has done the most harm to Christianity is the organized church in all of its various different forms. And I think it's still continuing to do that. And I belong to a church. I'm a participant in a church. I'm not saying let's get rid. I'm not a church anarchist. But I think we can trace a lot of the problems that Christians are facing today, both in the public specter and a lot of the behavioral problems that Christianity has been accused of justifiably so over the years, has been because of different problems with the organized religious structure.
And so for you, what is the relationship between the exoteric and the esoteric? So for Adam, it seems like it almost starts with the exoteric because that's his introduction to these concepts. Then it necessarily has to be an esoteric experience for a person to believe. And then I guess you circle back around into whatever's the most available or culturally convenient exoteric belief system. Is that the way? And Adam, if I'm misrepresenting what your thought process is on this topic, just speak up.
I think that's about right.
Yeah. So do you view that interaction between the exoteric and the esoteric differently?
Perhaps. And my opinions about this have evolved quite a bit over the years. Because on the one hand, you think, well, how will anyone know anything about God if not for the instruction of some sort of exoteric infrastructure, right? I would argue that give me a Bible, and if you don't have that, introduce me to anyone. It doesn't have to be inside of a church that has an understanding of that and is practicing what kinds of things are in the Bible as instructed by the Bible, particularly the New Testament. So I think the primary function of the corporate church in all of its various forms today, the biggest benefit derived from it is the community aspect and kind of the hub component of the different networking opportunities. And I don't mean from a commercial standpoint that the church has, but connecting other people with different groups, with different charitable organizations they could use, being able to come together as a group, which again creates a lot of tribalism, which I think probably is a negative side effect of a lot of churches today. But I think really you could do just fine without ever setting foot in a church if you just had a Bible, and maybe even do just fine if you didn't even have a Bible but knew someone who was reflecting Christ in the way that they lived.
Okay. Adam, I guess that's a good question for you. Where does the Bible fit in to your approach?
Well, the Bible is a very, it's an amazing work of art. It's actually many works of art combined into one and then reinvented many times over the centuries. I think the Bible operates on a great many levels. It operates allegorically. It operates poetically. It tells a story of various astronomical events. It tells the story of holy alchemy, of sacred alchemy from the ancient times. And I think I described it in our conversation the other day as a sort of like cosmic, a lot of it anyway, is like a cosmic Rorschach test. I mean, you get from the Bible spiritually whatever you bring to it when you approach it as an individual. As far as philosophy, the only part of the Bible that I really consider to be philosophy is the Sermon on the Mount and the sayings of Jesus Christ contained in the New Testament. The rest of the Bible I take at least allegorically, if not poetically, if not astrologically, or on some other way.
Okay. What about...
I feel like this is a cross-examination. You're taking notes.
Well, I just want to make sure that I circle back around.
I would expect nothing less of you, Boris. I'm not being critical.
Thank you. No, but give me a little bit more. So what makes the Sermon on the Mount so special compared to the rest of the Bible?
Well, the vast majority of the narrative of the Bible has elements of, religion that long precedes, the Jews and Christianity. It's clearly allegorical. Much of it is clearly astronomical, relating to various signs and movements of the heavens and things like that. There was also an Egyptian tradition of sacred alchemy, and there are allegorical references to that contained throughout the Bible as well. I mean, it's a work of art that operates and it inspires and touches you on many levels, and I don't think you can narrow it down to one thing. But the sayings of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mountain, and the various quotations of Jesus that are through the Old Testament, they're almost always statements of moral philosophy, or they're almost always some kind of moral philosophy, some kind of, as you would say, they're the closest thing to a rational argument you see in the Bible. I don't take those allegorically. I think that those are the Word of God. They are, and I think that Jesus said them. I think he was a real person.
So when he says in the Sermon on the Mount, the meek shall inherit the earth, you view that as like a literal statement, and then... Not
literal. I view it as a statement of practical morality that it's good to be humble, and that is a righteous thing, and that the humble will be rewarded.
Okay.
I don't interpret any text literally. The idea that there can be a literal meaning to a group of signs, a group of linguistic signs, is an absurdity from the jump, in my opinion. It's impossible to literally represent any slice or section of the phenomena of reality through linguistics. So the idea that I could literally write or retell the story of anything is totally absurd to me.
Okay. Nick, and how do you view Adam's approach to the Bible?
Well, I wouldn't say that I agree with him on everything, but I'm also not saying that I think he's wrong about anything. And I think that that's a very clear distinction that a lot of us have to have, particularly when dealing with the Old Testament and a good portion of the New Testament. I mean, I think he's spot on that we really don't know who wrote it, why they wrote it, what the composition elements were that came together for that thing. And I think for me, the main takeaway is if someone gives me the Bible, doesn't tell me anything else about it, I have no church tutelage of any kind from any point in my history, and just says, well, what do you think of this? If you really read through it and didn't get hung up, that was just it wasn't a ring that I dropped. I've been playing with some little thing on my finger, and I'm just going to leave it down there like I meant to drop it. So don't worry about picking it up. I would think you'd probably walk away from that going, here's a story of a bunch of petulant humans that are being instructed and led by someone proclaiming to be God, having some kind of interactions with that being in the Old Testament. It appears to be telling them to walk on a certain path. Those humans appear to be unable to do that, and he's telling them, if you will do what I'm saying, things will be better for you. And if they really believe that thing is God, which according to the Old Testament narratives, they appear to believe that, whether it's true or not, we don't know, but that's how the story goes. There's no uncertainty in their minds that they're having commune with God in some degree or another. God proves to them in the Old Testament narratives that he's a man or a being that sticks to his word. If you do this, I'll do that. You see, I'll take care of you. It'll be perfectly fine. They always seem to deviate. They know what they should be doing if that message is coming down from God. They don't do it. They're punished for it over and over and over again, and no one can seem to get it right. So you have this story of this group of people that are being told what the right thing to do is by someone that they really believe is God. But for some reason, they can't do it, even though they know this is God. They know that this person will protect them. We'll get to all the other people that aren't protected in a minute. I'm sure we're going there. But they don't do it. They can't do it. They cannot do it. So they have to the sacrifices. I mean, there's just not enough blood to wash all these sins away, right? Which is all leading to, we need a different kind of fix. Because you humans, I'm giving you every chance. Just one of you try to do what I'm asking you to do. Nobody can do it. I'm just telling you what I would kind of get from this if I read the whole narrative through, all the way through, which I'll grant is pretty disjointed through some parts of the Old Testament. So then we get to kind of the pinnacle of the story where God says, well, here's the only solution. I'm going to have to take care of this for you. I'm going to have a replacement sacrifice because you guys will never be able to do this. And I think that God knows all along that they're never going to be able to do it. It's almost like a kid that's saying, Dad, I can do this. I can take the car out. I promise. I'm not going to wreck it. I know I've never driven it before. I'm telling you I can do it. And the dad finally says, go ahead, give it a shot. The kid goes out and wrecks the car. So the dad finally says, look, I'll drive you wherever you need to go. So then we have the story of Jesus. And I think once we get to the New Testament, we can have a lot more faith in the veracity of the originality of most of the text of the New Testament. I don't think a lot of biblical scholars debate the origins of a lot of that. There are some stuff that is still pretty heavily debated as far as the authorship of it. But when we get to that, I start to see a guy who is claiming to be the Son of God coming down and saying, look, I'm going to fix your problem for you. And I'm going to show you how to live again, but I'm going to actually demonstrate it for you, both as a man and as God. This is what it looks like. And then he goes and he pays the ultimate price, which no one could figure out what he was doing or why he was going to do it, even up to his actual death, until afterwards he came back and said, look, there's more to this life than that. And I'm telling you, if you want to enjoy this life, don't worry about what's going to happen next. I'm telling you, I got it all squared away. It's good to go. Just live like I'm asking you to live in this life. Try your very best to do it. And not only will you have all these things in the future, you'll have a much better experience in this life. All this purpose and the meaning and the joy that you're looking for, I'm telling you how you can get it if you decide you want to pursue it. And so my faith was, I think that this book is onto something. I don't know where I stand as far as believing the entirety of it. I'm not a literalist by any stretch of the imagination, and that's upset a lot of people in the Christian church, but quite frankly, I think it's quite a ruse that most people are playing when they say, well, I'm a Baptist, therefore I believe all these things. I mean, I've known a lot of Christians over my time, and most people don't believe the same thing as the preacher does. Most people don't believe the same thing as the guy sitting across from him. If you really parse it out, we have a spectrum of beliefs about things, which is why I said to Adam, I don't agree with you on some of it, but I would never say that you're wrong because you won't agree with, and I find no fault in you. We all have our experience with this book and this journey that we go on. So as far as what I'm taking from the Bible, it's, I need to try doing something different because I tried the world's way for a long time. And the world had promised me, especially here in America, that you can really do anything you want. You can try anything you want. We have the freedom to be able to do that. And I tried all of it, from making money to the sexual side, to the substance abuse side, to the intellectual side, all of it. I tried all of those roads and never got any closer to what I was looking for. And then I started trying, maybe, just maybe, I'll start sacrificially putting other people before me, something I'd never done. It seemed ludicrous. It doesn't seem like it even follows the natural order of things. And suddenly, just like is explained in the Bible, as much as it wouldn't make any sense, I started experiencing joy and purpose and meaning in my life through doing those things. So in light of finally finding something that it was actually true, that if it said, I'd read so many self-help books going all the way back into the 80s, man. I've read every one of those things. And it's like this book that I'd been ignoring, sitting on my shelf for all of this time, had these instructions I just thought were ridiculous. I was preaching against this thing for all of this time. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to read it. I'm going to do what it says just to see what happens. And sure enough, just like everybody said that had done this prior to me over these thousands of years, I have found truth and purpose and meaning in my life. And I say truth cautiously. But that's what my sentiment is. And if you believe something different than me, make the Bible work for you. I will never critique what anyone else says it is, even if it's completely contrary to everything I believe. If it's working for them and bringing joy and peace and happiness and meaning into their life, fantastic. I'm not going to tell you to do anything different than that. That's kind of where I stand on that.
So it sounds like you generally agree that the Bible is this cosmic Rorschach test.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you get out of it essentially what you're putting in as
what you bring to it.
Well, here's why I love that analogy. I know what my reality is, which is different than yours, and what's different than yours. And so all I'm doing is holding up all of these different Rorschach tests going, does that look like my reality? No. Does this look like my reality? Kind of, but not really. And so I held up this thing, the Bible, and I was like, that's it. That is the reality for me. This thing is explaining my reality better than anything else I have ever seen or has been explained to me from any aspect.
So I do want to move on the basis of that, because I have a bunch of questions for you. But let me backtrack a little bit, just because I want to kind of stay on topic before we move to the Bible. So just a little bit backtrack to the esoteric versus the exoteric. So the way Adam defined the esoteric, it's this metaphysic. It exists outside of our reality.
The esoteric is the quest for the individual to make contact with that metaphysic, to somehow, become unified in it or with it. Think enlightenment.
Hold on.
Think Zen masters looking for enlightenment, or the quest for the Holy Grail, something along those natures.
Right. So, but if it exists entirely outside of our reality, right? How do you explain this apparent interaction of the esoteric, of the metaphysic, with our reality through your spiritual experience, A, through the exoteric belief systems, B, and through the Bible, to the extent that it's important to you, C?
I haven't said that I've actually made contact with this metaphysic. I am an initiate, and I am in a process and on a quest to make contact with it. I'm not sure that I have ascended the final mountain yet.
So when you say, okay, well, then this is kind of the last point that I wanted to stress as part of this first category, right? What is faith? What is faith then?
It's the opposite of reason.
Okay, but that doesn't, what is that? So what is reason then? And what do you mean by the opposite of reason?
Reason is exactly what you've always argued reason is. It's
the rule of non-contradiction?
Well, I've taken issue with your analysis of the rule of non-contradiction, but generally, yes. Time, space, causality, the principles of mathematics, these are the what did Kant call that? Those are the principles of sufficient reason, right? Time, space, and cause and effect.
Sure.
I mean, anything that operates upon, deduces and categorizes based on information in the world of phenomena, and makes predictions and draws conclusions based on those, that would be reason. Faith is the aspect of human psychology and human emotion that allows you to transcend this world of reason and this world of phenomena, and which gives you the power, the metaphysic power to try to make contact with God, to make contact with that metaphysic, to make contact with that thing that is outside of this world of phenomena. What is it about me that allows me or makes me believe that this is possible and that someday I will ascend the mountain? It's my soul. I said as part of my exoteric beliefs is that man has an eternal soul, and that eternal soul is somehow a part of God from the beginning and will return and be unified with God at some point or somehow metaphysically. That's an article of faith. That's an exoteric article of faith. But I believe that the soul in the human is the actual bridge between the world of phenomena and the metaphysic, if that answers your question.
Well, sort of. I mean, it just seems like the soul falls into the same category of metaphysic. It's all encompassed, all of these things that exist outside of our ability to perceive. So for me,
okay, but I believe that I can perceive my soul as a part of my, constitution, my ego, my existence as a human.
But so what is the soul then?
It's the part of every human being that was created when God created himself and will be reunited with God in the end.
So you perceive, and is it that you're saying that you perceive this inside yourself? So
I feel it inside myself, just like I feel my arms and my legs.
And it's distinctly this thing called soul?
Yes.
Okay, so then this is the question. How are you not fully initiated then? right? If you've already...
I have not been fully initiated, and my soul has not reunited with God.
The experience of the soul seems like it's an exoteric experience, which means it involves this metaphysic, this
Not
thing
exoteric,
that exists.
Absolutely esoteric.
I'm sorry, esoteric. That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah, so it's an esoteric experience.
Okay.
It's a personal experience of the metaphysic, correct?
Of a shadow of the metaphysic, of an aerosolized particle of the metaphysic.
Okay. And so by virtue of you having, and let me ask you, is your experience of your own soul, does that speak through your intuition? Does it speak through your emotion? What is the sensation that sort of puts you in contact with that part of yourself?
Well, what is the sensation you feel? What is the sensation of love? I mean,
well,
what is the sensation of a toothache? How do you reduce that to words is what I'm saying. How does a physical feeling, how do you reduce it to words, and what do those words really mean?
Well, we do have words for feelings, like a toothache. You can say, well, it's painful, right?
Well,
everybody knows what pain is. You may not be able
right.
to describe the subjective experience of pain.
But there's an infinite number of shades of pain, and there's no way to describe exactly what a toothache feels like vis-a-vis a broken leg or a punch in the nose.
So what is this? Okay, but there's a way to approximate. For example, you can use the word pain, and we approximately know the discomfort associated with it, right? But when you say the word soul, that concept seems completely foreign. It seems like there's no attempt to define it whatsoever, similar to...
You want me to define it again? I will. The soul is an eternal part, a piece, an aerosolized droplet of God that is deposited in every human being that's ever existed, and that eventually will reunite with God through a metaphysical process.
Well, that's not what I'm asking at all. Right?
You're asking me to demonstrate that 2 + 2 + 3 means I have a soul, which I cannot do, which I've told you 1,000 times is impossible. So you can ask again, and I'll give you the same answer.
I'm asking you to describe your experience of the soul. I don't need some textbook definition of what a soul is, because obviously I don't have any basis to evaluate that. What I'm saying is, what is it that you feel? Is there a way to put that into words at all? Because clearly you have a word for it. You're calling it soul. And that word comes with a ton of exoteric baggage, and obviously that's where my mind immediately goes. So you're the one using this term. You're saying I have it, and that I'm
saying you have it too.
Well, you're saying that you've experienced it for yourself, and this is how you know, presumably, that you have it and I have it and everybody else
I've experienced it spiritually. If you want me to demonstrate it rationally, I cannot. All I can say is that it is real, that it is a part of me, that it's as imminent to me as my fingernails are on my hand right now. It's just that mundane. It's not mundane at all, but it's just that common. It's with me. How can I describe it? It's whatever is in me that's not of the material world. It's everything that's in me that is not, bone and sinew and blood.
Here's why I find this conversation very, very fascinating. It kind of comes full circle to what I was describing before. I can tell that you have absolutely no clue even where to begin to contemplate what Adam is talking about. And to a certain degree, I can't either. But that demonstrates just how different the human experience of reality is and how we view ourselves through the lens of whatever that reality is, which is why I'm always so cautious about a religious doctrine saying, here's how things are, here's how you should feel, and here's how it works, which I think there should be a lot more personal liberty in that regard. If you were going to ask me that question next, and I don't know if you were or not.
Yes, I will. So go ahead.
The only, and I find it fascinating, and it's always I found, for those of you that don't know, now I know that Adam has a deep artistic background. He's a musician, and I found that people much more in tune with artistic things feel a sense of soul a lot more than I've ever been able to, and I envy that too a lot. I envy that a lot too. I'm a quasi artist. I played the drums. I know you probably think that's not art, which you're probably right. It's not.
I love drums.
I have a daughter that's an artist, and she's very much in tune with just like something in herself, but more than herself. And it's what is that? Like I want that feeling. The only sense that I've ever had of self that's not what I've actually experienced over the course of my life is, for the most part, I see myself as a product of all of my experiences over the course of my life. I'm a big bag of cells and neurons that's just been reacting to all the inputs all of this time, with the exception of the fact the only thing that doesn't make sense to me, which is what teeters up to the very brink of something we might call a soul, is the fact that my impulse is to constantly make irrationally self-destructive decisions. I have to force myself to not do things that would destroy my life, destroy my family, destroy my finances. And throughout the entire course of my life, I felt that has been my impulse. And I think for most people it is. We want to pursue success. We want to pursue finances. For men in particular, we want to pursue sexual things, often disregarding all of the negative baggage that come along with it. It takes a lot of restraint to not do those things. And in the natural world, to be irrationally self-destructive would not be something that would be very good for longevity for most creatures. So I keep asking myself, why, if I can make the conscious choice to just do things that are both productive and make me happy through the course of my life, do I constantly feel these impulses to do irrationally self-destructive things that could completely ruin me if I actually did any of them? And I fantasize about these things all of the time. And I think all of us do to certain extents. Maybe we don't recognize that they could be bad things. And I know you'll probably disagree with that to certain extents. But that's like, what is going on? Because this doesn't make any rational sense. If this was a purely naturalistic world, my impulse would be to do things that would both motivate me to continue to do them. In other words, they wouldn't harm me by doing them, and would be things that I would look forward to be eating for the sake of having calories, things like that, right? But I don't. And when I do those things, they don't bring me any joy at all. They bring me hardship and sorrow and misery that could last the rest of my life. When I do the things that I feel like I have to force myself to do, which would be a lot of the things as instructed in the Bible, I don't ever want to do them. I have to force myself to do them. But when I do it, next thing you know, I've suddenly found the joy and happiness and all that comes along with that. So my impulse is to do the things that would harm me and harm other people around me. I want to do those things all the time. The things I don't want to do, though, like Paul says in Romans, are the things that bring me joy. And it's like, what is going on here? I can't find any rational explanation for that except some sort of soul-like function within my body that is doing something that doesn't make any rational sense. But I feel like it's explained pretty well in the Bible, assuming the Bible's accurate.
Can I make one more comment on the soul? So you wanted a description. One thing that I've always found helpful is to look to the other great world religious traditions, to try to enhance my understanding of my own feelings about religions. But in the Vedic religion, they have, I think, the best description of the relationship of the soul to God, to the Ein Sof, for the ultimate thing. So God was Brahman. Right. Mm-hmm. Brahman meant like God as one, right? The God in and of himself, the God of Genesis right before chapter 1, right before the first verse of the Bible, right? Brahman, that's Brahman. Atman was also God, but Atman was the part of God that is deposited in the individual human being. And the idea in the Vedic religion is that Brahman and Atman are one, but Brahman became tired and Brahman became bored, and so Brahman decided to play as being every existing thing in the universe. And at some point, Brahma wakes up, and all these souls, all the aerosolized particles, are once again and always have been Brahman.
Right, but it sounds like a romantic idea, right? But there's, it's hard for me to wrap my head around it as anything other than fancy. And you could point to some other similarities, like, it's interesting that Brahma is also viewed as, Brahman is also viewed as triune, right? Brahman the creator, Shiva the destroyer, the renewer, and Krishna the preserver.
That is correct. But that tripartite aspect of God is like universal in those religions that were forming around the time that the rise of Christianity occurred. I mean, the Egyptian religion was also Isis, Osiris, and Horus. The Mithric religion had a trinity. There's a trinity in the late Greek religion with Dionysus, Zeus, and what is Dionysus' mother's name? I can't remember, but that was also
Gotcha. And then there's some similarities also with the Vedic religions to the end of days. I think Krishna is described as a rider on the pale horse with a tongue like a sword smiting the wicked.
There's a great deal of scholarly literature that argues that the Vedic religions and Christianity had some kind of precursor that was common to both of them.
But I noticed that neither one of you is really, and maybe given enough time, you would have made those arguments. Like, I find that a little bit more compelling than simply, well, I'm in touch with this metaphysics somehow, and if you don't feel it, you will feel it at some point, but I can't explain it to you.
Well, I mean, the I'm in touch with the feeling somehow is part of the esoteric part, and
Right.
whether you're talking about, Hellenistic state religion or Egyptian state religion or Roman state religion, you're talking about exoteric. You're talking about dogmatic belief systems and systems of theology.
I get. Did I misuse the word again?
No. You didn't at all. But
Okay.
I think what you were saying that my observation that there are clear precursors to Christianity in many of these religions that preceded it. Your statement was something along, well, that makes a lot more sense to me. Well, those arguments, those observations are, to me, clearly in the exoteric realm, right? I mean, that has nothing to do with my personal quest to reach the metaphysic and to hit the top of the mountain.
Gotcha. So then real quick, just back to the Sermon on the Mount, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the phrase I used, as far as the meek inheriting the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're taking from that, well, one ought to be humble. But I could take from that and say, well...
No, if one is humble, one will be rewarded by God.
Okay. So, and so implicit in that is this directive to be humble, presumably.
It's a directive against arrogance. It's a directive towards selflessness.
But note this, it's also a directive against confidence, right? Because meekness is not only the opposite of foolhardiness or ambition or whatever, it's also the opposite of something very positive, like just being confident in yourself. And all I'm saying is, and this, I think you could easily dispense with what I'm saying.
I don't think the fact that Jesus said the meek the meek will inherit the earth means that you should never be confident. I don't think that's how it works.
Well, right, but you can say that. My point is, if we're dealing with the actual language being used, you can easily see how it would mean both things.
Well, meek actually just means small, I believe, if you look it up. But that's the King James translation of a series of translations, and we could go back and figure out what the original Coptic or Greek was and define that. But still, it wouldn't make a difference to the way I think about it.
Well, again, my concern has to do with the value of these words that are contained in the Bible, right? And so here you're saying, look, it's a. And by the way, you can dispense with all of my objections by just reiterating what you said before. This is a Rorschach test. So maybe you don't have a problem with confidence. Maybe you're confident enough. That's really not your problem. Maybe for you, the problem has been arrogance. And so you read the Bible, you read those words, and you interpret it in a way that it relates to you as a directive to moderate your own excesses.
I mean, in the Christian tradition, the meek shall inherit the earth, and pride is the first deadly sin, pride is the opposite of meekness, right?
Well, yes, but pride, but note this, even there, right? The word pride is not all bad. You want to have pride. You want to have self-respect, because self-respect is a form of pride. Now, we could use pride as an extreme form of that, like kind of, and it all, with respect to this, it does come back to kind of the Greek virtues, right? You can be foolhardy, you can be a coward. What you should be is kind of middle of the road and just be brave.
Right. That's what Buddha called the middle path.
Right, but that's not. But again, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is these statements can be read any which way.
Well, if you're going to read these statements as strict statements of rational philosophy, then you're going to dismiss them immediately, because that's not what they are. That's not how they were intended.
And I think the thing that's really throwing me for a loop is this relationship between the exoteric and the esoteric, such that you're able to discount the exoteric on the back end. You're able to say you can gather from the Bible what it is that you seek to gather from the Bible.
No, I get from the Bible what I bring to the Bible. Whatever I have spiritually in my person is already with me and is always with me from birth. And when I go to the Bible, it's like a mirror. It helps me see that.
So, like, could you tie it to this particular phrase? So, the meek shall inherit the earth. You read that statement, right? And so, what is your experience then?
I experience it as a statement of philosophy, as a statement of poetry, as a statement of artistry, as a musical statement.
Who you are? So, because you said you read the Bible and it reflects. It's a reflection of who you are. How does that statement specifically reflect who you are, and what is the connection?
I would say I'm at my best when I have my pride in check and when I embrace my inner meekness.
And that, do you feel that you have a tendency to be overly confident, and so this is a good instruction for you?
All I know is that I'm at my best when I am not being an arrogant asshole.
Okay. Now, if somebody
I think that that's the meaning of the verse ultimately for me.
Now, if somebody has a problem with meekness, because there's certainly people like that, people who have been traumatized or just a feature of their personality or temperament where they tend to be meek, right? So a person like that wouldn't benefit from an instruction to be meek. So what would you expect a person like that to take away if they've already experienced God esoterically, right? And they're looking for some kind of grounding on the back end. And so they're reading the Bible, they're perceiving it, but they are, they have kind of a different life experience, to Nick's point. Well, the Bible is universal. It's available for everybody. That's the claim, right? It's available here for everybody.
It's a text that's published. So yeah, it's available.
Can I take a crack at that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this wraps pretty well into what I was describing through my own personal experience. And it really piggybacks on what Adam was saying as well. As you know, because you know me outside of the humility I'm forcing myself to have on your show, I'm a pretty arrogant person, and I'm an overconfident person, and it's gotten me in a lot of trouble over the years. And when I see that, and when I'm at my best of arrogance, and I say that with my tongue in my cheek, it's when I'm doing well at work, marriage is going well, family's going well, kids are doing good at sports, everybody's getting good grades, I'm not fighting with anybody right now. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about everything. I really don't need help with anything because I've got everything under control. When I've got everything under control, there's very, very little room for commune with God, reliance on God, any type of reliance on God for my emotional health or anything like that. When I'm knocked on my butt, which happens fairly frequently, is when I become very meek, I become very self-conscious, and I realize that I'm not in control and I'm not going to be happy by my own accord because I cannot bring that on myself despite all of my myriad attempts to do that over the years. And so when I read that passage, I hear Jesus saying, look, there's people around you that rule you, that will direct the course of your life. It's okay for you to be, look at Paul. Paul was a servant of all servants, but he was a confident guy. He went down and stood in the middle of Athens and was like, bring it on. Who wants to debate me? So he was a confident guy. But he was also very meek in that he was humble. When he showed up in a town, he's like, don't pay me anything. I'll work my own way through this. So I think what Jesus is saying is when you're at your lowest, that's when you become, I hate to use an inside baseball term, the most blessed. That's when you feel closest in your walk with God. That's been my experience through my whole life. It's not when I've got it all under control. It's not when I'm knocking out of the park. Those moments, God is very, very distant from me. And that begins my march towards meaninglessness, purposeness, and sadness as I go through these peaks and valleys over the course of my life. Man, when I am just at the absolute lowest, that's when I'm closest to God. And that is the beginning of the climb out of the trough for me back to joy and purpose and meaning in the course of my life. And I feel that so powerfully when I hear Jesus say things like that to these people, because he wasn't down there talking to the Romans or the well-to-do Jews down in Jerusalem. He was talking to the people who were fishermen and farmers and probably struggling for every meal and saying, look, believe it or not, you're happier than those people are. You will inherit the earth. And I don't know what exactly he meant by inherit the earth, if he was talking about something in the future, just saying you're having what everyone's really after, this happiness. Believe it or not, you've got it more than those guys do. That's what I hear when I read those passages.
And one other thing, every verse is not going to be salient or is not going to touch an individual that comes to it at every moment of their life. There's another verse in the Bible that says there's a time for everything under heaven, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes I may go to the Bible and maybe exactly. So sometimes when I go to the Bible, maybe I need the poetry and the power of the meek shall inherit the earth. And other times when I go to the Bible, maybe I need the poetry and the power of, the Son of Man shall come with a sword and I would like to divide, So the Bible is so complicated, and it operates on so many levels and in so many, ways. I don't really have words for it. It's astounding. The more you study it, the more you find out about it, the more aspects of it that you dig into, the more unbelievable it becomes that this could ever have been composed by anything or anyone.
So let me, I guess for me that begs the question, right? Mm-hmm. Because if the Bible is a reflection of you, right? Like, wouldn't that go for every text? Like, wouldn't that go for War and Peace too? You can read War and Peace, and that also can very much be a Rorschach test, right? You get from it what you
every natural phenomena is a Rorschach test on some level or another. You get from it what you bring to it. But the Bible just happens to be one of the most just uncanny and inexplicable and brilliant beyond description works of art that you can bring things to that mankind has ever, been revealed.
Well, would it surprise you that I don't feel that way? Having read the Bible multiple times, I'm not particularly in awe of it as a work of art. I don't think it just doesn't resonate with me in the same way that it clearly does with you. I'm wondering whether that's a matter of effort or not. But like reading the Brothers Karamazov, was very much influential. I wouldn't say that it was any less influential on me than reading the Bible and internalizing it. So, and I guess I think it's important to, like, for me to understand, like, are you putting the Bible on the pedestal? Is it in any way unique, or is all of reality, all of existence, some kind of Rorschach test, just as well as the Bible? And the Bible just happens to be interesting to you, but we can literally hold anything up like a mirror.
Well, anything can be a Rorschach test, but there's only one Bible. I mean, does it surprise me that you're not moved by the artistry and the poetry and the genius that went into the production of the Bible? No, that doesn't surprise me at all, because I know you, and it's not your kind of thought process.
Okay, the other and the real thing that I think, you mentioned the genius of the Bible, but like, the meek will inherit the earth, right? Okay. And this has come up in our discussions before, but like the 10 Commandments, love thy neighbor as thyself. Like, you can interpret it in a pedestrian way, the way that people tend to interpret it. I call that Bible light. Like, you avoid the harsher interpretations of these statements, right? Mm-hmm. So you could say, well, you just have to be nice to everybody. You have to love everybody.
I take it 100% literally.
Right. So if you take it literally, then remember the example I've given.
Okay, so the love thy neighbor as thyself is not actually in the 10 Commandments. That's a statement of Jesus. He said there were two great commandments. One is to love thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul, and the second, which is like unto it, is to love thy neighbor as thyself.
I thought that was literally the second commandment.
That's not in the 10 Commandments, I don't think.
That was
it's the second commandment.
Love thy neighbor as thyself?
Yeah, love thy God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Okay, you're right. You are right. I'm sorry.
But regardless, even if it wasn't, right? But let's say that's a point, like, just like the meek will inherit the earth, right? Mm-hmm. It's something you can pluck out, and if you choose to, you can learn something from it, and you can apply it to your life in a reasonable way. Mm-hmm. Or you can read it literally, like the meek will inherit the earth means you shouldn't be confident. Right?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that, though. I wouldn't say that. I don't think that's what that's saying.
I mean, that's your interpretation, and that's a very convenient interpretation for your camp. But
I'm not interpreting in one way or the other. What I'm saying is that there is a number of interpretations that are possible, mm-hmm. some of which make moral sense and are applicable and pragmatic, and others that make no sense.
But I think this gets down to what the question you just asked, or with the statement that you just made, in that you're not moved you don't feel the same way about it that we do. And I remember, I mean, I was you for a long time. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or anything else. And I love you very dearly. But I mean, I've seen everything through your eyes. And I remember very well what that was like. And I remember reading through the Bible and going, it's just an old book like everything else. I remember what that feeling was like. And if you read it going into it, going, this is just an old book like anything else, then it is what you believe it's going to be going into it. And if you start and I'm not saying that you should now read it as me and trust what I'm telling you and everything is going to be different. I mean, it's up to you to decide to do it and experience it as you will. But once you start looking at from, is there a way to look at this that makes more sense from the other perspective? And I think for all of the different points that we could look at, we could say that, okay, there's another way to look at this, and it does make sense from this perspective. If we simply look at it and say, he's saying don't be confident, then, and there's no other way to interpret that, then I could see how you would arrive at that position.
Well, no. And that's not my assertion, right? I totally concede that you can interpret it in the way that you guys are interpreting it. I just think that that's selective interpretation. Same thing with the second commandment of the 10 Commandments, right? You can interpret it in a way that is pragmatic, but you can also easily, based on the language used, interpret it in the way that I described, which leads to an absurd result, i.e., if your child and the child of your friend are drowning and they're equidistant from you, it should not matter to you which child you try to rescue first, because you should love your neighbor as thyself. And so if there's no pragmatic reason to go after one rather than the other, there should be no priority that you would place on your own offspring.
Understand, nobody actually loves their neighbor as themselves. These are aspirational things, man. These are disciplines. These are not you do this. You try for this. You strive for this. This is the goal of your humanity.
But my position is that it would be wrong for you. It would be morally wrong for you not to rescue your child first. You have an obligation to your child. And the reason I believe that is because to me, that seems rationally true. You put your child in the world, you owe a duty to that child, and so you have an obligation. This suggests that you don't have such an obligation to your own offspring versus the offspring of your neighbor. And what is aspirational is that you should not prioritize your own well-being. I think that notion is morally wrong. And what I think is interesting, when you said the Bible is a work of genius, when we were talking about the statement about being meek, with reason, we don't seem to have that problem, right? Like reason, going back all the way to Aristotle, the ancient Greeks, seem to, take into account the nuance, right? And so they had the Greek virtues. They were able to parse out, hey, foolhardiness from cowardice, bravery is where they settled, right? The Bible doesn't seem to do that. So it seems like reason.
So you're criticizing the Bible for not being a work of Aristotelian philosophy?
I'm criticizing your statement that the Bible is a work of genius in the sense that it doesn't quite seem to be, right? Like, so it seems to have these failings.
Well, I mean, is Shakespeare's work a work of genius?
It is, yeah.
Okay, well, how much more poetry is there in the Bible than Shakespeare? I mean, the Bible is the greatest work of poetry in the English language. The King James Bible is, in my opinion, the greatest work of poetry. Take all the dogma and all the theology and all the preconceived ideas out of it. It's still one of the greatest compositions of poetry ever.
Sure, describing a woman's neck as a tower with shields hanging off
Beautiful.
of it.
I almost started crying when you said that. Can I linger on one thing real quick?
Yes, please.
Because it goes back to the whole worldview thing, which is when you read the Bible, worldview is everything, I think. Mm-hmm. So getting back to the love your neighbor as yourself thing. If your starting position is there is no God, it makes absolutely no sense to ever do that. From a purely naturalistic perspective, of course, you want to continue your genetic line and everything should surround that, right? You would always save your children more than you because the highest priority would be continuing your genetic line. But shave everything else off. The reason why you're here is to keep your genes going. That means you take from other people if you have to, if that's what it takes to keep the genes going. I'm not criticizing anything, but this is how you have to think about it if it's a purely naturalistic
I don't think about it
perspective.
like that at all. So,
Okay, so let me drill down to real quick to where,
please. Mm-hmm.
If there's no God, it has to be a materialist, naturalistic standpoint. You can't be like a halfway thing, right? Mm-hmm. So the only moral thing to do, if we can use that term, would be what is going to give me the highest odds of continuing my genetics.
Well, that's assuming that the standard of morality is you continuing your genetics.
Well, without God, the standard of morality is pleasure and pain. How much pleasure can I get and how much pain can I avoid?
So hold on,
Well, that's what you're claiming because it's easy then to dismiss my position.
No,
if
well, explain to me how it's not.
Because the standard is meaning.
Well, if the only thing that there is a flash of consciousness between two infinite oceans of infinity, what does it matter other than how much pleasure
I think you might be the greatest poet I've ever met. Every word out of your mouth is just like dripping with poetry. It's unbelievable. Even like basic just statements, I'm just blown away.
Welcome to my world, man. This is every day.
But hold on, let me. So hold on, I need to make sure that, because this is where I was when I was a naturalist. Even though I didn't adhere to what my standards should have been, because I didn't want to wind up doing something that could throw me in jail, even though it may have made more sense from a naturalistic perspective to do it. What could possibly be the point of your existence if not to, from a long-term perspective, if not to do whatever it takes to ensure the consistency of your genetic line?
Meaning. I think that the purpose of life is to find meaning.
Yeah, but if you're going to be gone and there's no repercussions and you'll be forgotten about, what is the meaning
I don't
part?
think that just because things aren't eternal that they're not meaningful or that they're not significant simply by virtue of their temporality.
But their significance ends as soon as your ego ends.
That's irrelevant.
Not to me.
Wow, I don't know if I can
Not to me, buddy. Not to me.
Well, William Lane Craig, who we're both kind of fans of, I would say, he has this really interesting discussion with an atheist moralist, and I don't quite buy the guy's talking points, frankly, but he's also very smart. But William Lane Craig really grapples with it. He struggles with this, and they go back and forth quite a bit. And of course, neither one of you can really bite the bullet and say that just because something doesn't have cosmic significance, it has no significance at all. I don't think either one of you would claim that. And so
I would say that.
I would too.
Yeah.
You would say that just because something has no cosmic significance, that it can have no significance at all?
First of all, everything in the world of phenomena to me has cosmic significance, because everything is ultimately traces back to the but-for cause, which is God. So everything has cosmic significance for me. But if there was something that didn't have cosmic significance, I would say that it's meaningless.
Yeah, it might feel good for a little while we're alive and make you feel like you want to do it again, but in the grand scheme of things, it's ultimately meaningless.
Yeah, but this is the reason why your perspective sort of strikes me as this kind of death cult perspective, because it really has nothing to do with reality as far as I understand it.
And I see your perspective as a living death cult.
Christianity is absolutely a death cult if the definition of that is we are living for something we expect to be beyond this life. And if that's what you would label as a death cult, I would say, yeah. It's got a lot of baggage with that word, but certainly every Christian should be living.
Life is what we're doing right now.
Sure.
And I don't think it's virtuous to miss it.
And without a metaphysic, for me, life is a living death.
Yeah.
So okay.
That's not to say that it can't be enjoyed. In fact,
but it's not about pleasure and pain, right?
Because I think it's all about the pleasure and the pain.
Well,
without God, it has to be about.
I think that's
and pain.
A very simple. But see, I think
what else is there?
Meaning
that disappears forever as soon as you do.
Yes, that's fine. That's irrespective. It doesn't mean that it's not meaningful just because it's fleeting or temporal. That doesn't mean that it's not important.
What happens to the meaning after you go away?
Say again?
What happens to the meaning after you're gone? After 60 years
disappears
or 100 years or whatever?
It disappears.
Okay.
What happens to my life? It's gone too. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean it wasn't beautiful while it was here, and it doesn't mean that I shouldn't make the best of it. And maybe, and for me, the preoccupation with something outside of this life seems counterproductive. It seems derisive. It seems that you guys have, some form of derision to life, to the temporal, brief, fleeting.
How have I shown derision to life?
No. I'm not saying you're showing it in any particular way. I'm saying just by virtue of your philosophy, by virtue of this approach, and by virtue of discounting the significance of our existence simply because it's temporal.
Well, it's not the significance that I'm discounting. It's the possibility of meaning that I'm discounting. And I don't think there can be any meaning without a metaphysic other than pleasure and pain, or some kind of cunning, or what can I do to best advantage myself and disadvantage my enemies. To me, there's no meaning in that. That is a circle jerk. That is masturbation. That is a nullity. It's vapid. It's void.
Nick, can you speak to that?
From a purely naturalistic perspective, despite the sense of having things that may feel valuable to us as far as experiences over the short term, if we are purely a product of cells coming together, the only thing in my mind that makes the most sense, if you fully embrace that, is you do whatever it takes, no matter who you have to stomp on or hurt or kill, to make sure your genetic line continues. From a purely clinical standpoint, that would make the most sense. You might not be happy all the time throughout the course of your life, but that would be the point of your existence. And that still assumes that the universe is infinite. Because if the universe isn't infinite, then it was all just a crappy experience that was dotted with some high watermarks occasionally throughout it. A lot of frustration, a lot of pain that really amounted to nothing at the end of the day.
I think that, humans are unique because we have this capacity for reason. And I think reason is what allows us to perceive meaning. I think animals live very much in the way you describe. And we are animals, certainly, up to a point, but then we are something else. We are something different and something special, and we have this faculty. And that faculty of reason, the rule of non-contradiction, is what allows us, at least for me, it's very easy to perceive meaning through that framework.
So you believe that you've found meaning through reason?
Well, yes, so long as my premises remain convincing to me, which through these discussions with you've shaken a lot of my sort of certainty in that. And so right now, my position, I'm just saying this is where my mindset is at right now, but my position has been shaken somewhat. It's very possible that I'm experiencing what you once experienced, and that is that this just isn't enough. And then at some point you have to make a decision. Do do you, from my perspective right now, do you cave into faith, which seems to me like the easy way out, like just assume something without any
faith is absolutely not easy. It's the most difficult thing there is.
I want to pause for just a minute to say something I've said before, but not on your program. I think the 4 most valuable words that a Christian can utter is, and I've taken so much slack for this, but I believe it with every ounce of my being, I could be wrong. A lot of times we have to acknowledge that we are not living the reality of other people. And there could be, if we're right about anything, eternal consequences for us changing people's opinions about things. And I know a lot of people that have been stripped away from the faith of their youth, that have been brought into a church, and their lives were destroyed by a church, by a bad pastor, by whatever. And so I would never be someone to say, Boris, even though I believe through the course of my own experience, it has changed everything in my life, literally every aspect of my life for the better by making the choices that I did. To say that, Boris, everything is going to be so much better for you if you believe it. I mean, I want to say that because I believe it, but it's based on my reality. So if what you're believing now is working great for you, what a true sin it would be for us to both get to the end of this life and it turns out that I was wrong.
Can I just say this too? One of my basic theological ideas, is that a faith that doesn't constantly expose itself to the possibility of non-faith is no faith at all. It's simply it's simply convenience. That's all it is. It's a crutch at that point.
All right. Go ahead. Sorry. Was there something else?
I mean, I had something else, but I forgot.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right. Well, this actually leads me to kind of the last thing to maybe.
The other thing was, and if you could reason your way to faith, it would not be faith. We'd all have it. Everybody would agree upon it, and it would be nothing.
All right.
That's an interesting perspective, and I agree with that. That's interesting.
This leads me to kind of the thing that I think would be a nice bookend to this section of the discussion, and that is this. I can say, especially in light of this eternal life situation, right? And the meaning, the obvious improvement on the status of meaning that would bring, right? Because while I disagree with you guys vehemently that temporal meaning is meaningless, right? Like I totally disagree with that, or illusory. I think there is absolutely such a thing as temporal meaning, and I can have a deeper discussion about that if we need to.
And I would say you're right about that too, if we qualify it as temporal.
Okay, but cosmic meaning, eternal meaning. I mean, my gosh, what human would not want that validation that I'm here for a purpose, that God, that the maker of all worlds, has selected me and has chosen me. And more importantly, as somebody with 4 children, I want to see my children forever. I want to see my parents forever. I would love that. There's nothing more, frankly, that I would want. If there's one thing that my heart desires that is left to desire from this kind of materialistic worldview that I'm in, it's that. I'm gonna miss my family, of course. And that doesn't mean that the nature of like an eternity makes any more sense to me. I've expressed to you before, like heaven just seems absurd. Like the beauty of man is that we're temporal. Like I think that's like essential to us in many ways. But of course, a deep cry of my soul is for some kind of cosmic meaning, of course. And so I could even go so far as to say that I hope very much, despite being an atheist and all that, or an agnostic now, because Adam has basically explained to me I'm not an atheist after all, I'm just agnostic. But I'm a vehement agnostic, a zealous agnostic, okay? So clearly, I could say that I hope that this kind of metaphysic exists. I can go so far as to say I hope, okay? I do not know, right? So that's short of knowledge. I do not know that it exists. When you guys use the word faith, this is where y'all lose me in this context, right? Because again, I can say I hope, I cannot say I know. Both of you would say you hope, and both of you have admitted you don't know. What the F is faith then? If it's not knowledge and it's not a hope, what is it?
It's that which allows man to transcend reason. Hope can be either rational or irrational. I can have rational hope that maybe World War III won't start in Ukraine. That's a rational hope, right? There's a rational basis for that hope. I can have irrational hope that, I don't know, I'll become, the greatest, most sexiest man who ever lived at the age of 60. Okay, that's irrational hope, right?
There's still time.
So hope can be rational or irrational. Faith is per se irrational and anti-rational. You have to understand this. Faith is what allows the ego, the self, the self-concept, psychologically to transcend reason and to approach the metaphysic. That's what it is.
Yeah. So it, again, like that strikes me as entirely nonsensical, and maybe that's just because I'm not at that point yet, and the chakras of my brain haven't opened up or whatever. I don't know. But so Nick,
you need some more insights in here.
Yeah, a little insight from you then on the same topic, and we can close it out.
I love listening to Adam talk because it's always so well thought out, and you can tell that he's not. I'm like most of my life flying by the seat of my pants and trying to speak off the cuff a little bit more, but it's obvious that you spend a lot of time contemplating these things. I have always, and again, I know I might, if I ever have any Christian friends that are listening to this, their knee-jerk reaction will be reviled by what I'm about to say. But I consider myself a man of very little faith. And I define faith as the closer the more absurd, which I think is probably in line with what you're saying, the more absurd a thing that we're saying that we believe in from a reasonable standpoint, the more faith that's required. When it comes to Christianity, I don't have any degree of faith in the things I find absurd. A couple of examples. And some people will wave this around as their banner of their extreme display of faith. One example for me is the age of the earth thing. There are some fundamentalist Christians, and if you've ever been to Kentucky, you can see a whole museum dedicated to it, believe the earth is 6,000 years old, despite irrefutable evidence. I mean, there's written records going back, a string of unbroken written records going back way more than 6,000 years, never mind billions of years. And to say, you know what, I'm in the face of all of the evidence that clearly anybody can go. I mean, you don't have to know somebody, go to any museum in the world, have even a minor understanding of geology or history or anything. The earth is more than 6,000 years old. But to look at that and go, I'm going to have faith that this reality is not correct. And I'm going to believe that the earth is 6,000 years old, which, by the way, I think can't even be supported biblically, but that's an entirely different discussion. Things like that, I would say, are when faith is really, really, really being pushed to the limit. But I'm a man of so little faith that anything that I can't look at within the Bible or any tenet of Christianity that does not line up with reality as I experience it, I either think that someone has misinterpreted it, I don't fully understand it, it's a lie. I don't believe anything that requires me to dismiss what I experience as reality. And anybody that is doing that, I'd say, well, what's the difference between you and any other religion, the ones you mock, the cult religions, because they're all just doing the same thing to various different degrees. If you're having to hang up reason for every tenet of your faith, your spirituality, I would say something's wrong, because I've got one that's pretty much lines up with everything I understand about reality right here. And where it doesn't, let's take a look at that section of it. Let's see if there's another possible explanation. If there's not, we may need to entirely think what we think about those sections. So for me, as far as faith and believing that there's something other than me that's the God, that's probably the extent of my faith. I have nothing that I've experienced over the course of my life to evidence that, other than some things I've described to you off the air a few times, things that go way beyond coincidence in the course of my life that have really bolstered that faith. The Bible being contrary to what I feel like my impulses are, as I've described before, makes me lean to, which I think, again, is a reasonable decision, not a faith decision so much, but just to go, this actually makes a lot more sense to me than everything else I've experienced that are contrary to this or competing with this. So my faith is just trusting the things that seems most reasonable to me at that point. That's the extent of my faith. When I read things that are like, that makes absolutely no sense, but I'm going to believe it anyway because the church says I need to believe it. There's not one aspect of my walk that has been any part of that kind of faith.
And just building on that, I'd like to say that it's always been my belief that faith begins at the point where reason breaks down and folds back on itself and stops making sense.
That's what I'm talking about. That kind of stuff right there. All day it's been coming out of him. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me push just a little bit more on you then. Sure. So this notion of faith being anti-reason, entirely the opposite of reason, and also just address it in the context of what I said, the difference between knowledge and hope. Adam said, well, hope can be rational, it can be irrational. Faith can only be irrational.
Well, I wouldn't say so. It depends on how we're defining faith. So, I mean, if faith can simply be watered down to the belief in something that can't be proven, well, I've got a lot of faith in a lot of different things, not just religiously, but all through the spectrum of my existence. I've got a lot of faith in that regard. In the sense that I was talking about it, the magnitude of the faith within the exoteric experience seems to be correlated with how ludicrous something is that you say you believe in. So we've got two different ranges here, I would say. We have the esoteric side of it, which is just how much trust am I putting in things that I have absolutely no way of knowing, and there's all kinds of things that I could put that trust in.
Like what?
Well, I don't understand how
God would be the one thing, and you kind of narrowed it earlier when you were responding to this. You said there's very few things I actually accept by faith.
Well,
but now you're saying there's a lot of things that you would accept by faith.
Well, I have no idea if I believe that Jesus was a real person. I didn't see him. I didn't talk to him. I believe what I read about him in the Bible. I believe that was accurate. I believe the guys that wrote most of the Gospels, whoever they were telling something that they believed was true when they wrote it. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I'm having faith that those guys were accounting an actual event.
But these aren't right, and these aren't separate acts of faith.
I have faith that there's somehow signals broadcast from my local TV station that come to my TV and give me TV programming back in the old days before we had cable. Okay, I had no idea how that happened or why that happened or what was the explanation of that, but I know that happened. I think there's that aspect of it too.
Well, how's that faith? But you see the TV coming, there's an explanation.
But I don't have any idea what it is. I don't know the spectrums and the wavelengths and the various acoustic, engineering requirements of broadcasting a signal from one station to another. I don't know that.
Yeah, but I suppose in that sense, you could at least you could figure it out if someone wanted to sit you down and talk to it. Maybe an example that the guy used in the William Lane Craig interview was gravity. Like, we know it does something and we kind of understand what it's doing, but nobody understands how it actually works. Like no one could even explain to you how it works. Yeah,
right. Yeah, we do.
No, we don't. We have no idea why gravity acts the way it does. We can describe. We can describe what it does. We cannot actually explain why.
No, but we can explain how it works.
Yeah, but that's not explaining why.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think you said how it works.
We can explain how gravity works fairly well, although, we've had one great explanation from Newton and a second great explanation from Einstein, and perhaps there will be a third great explanation at some point from some genius down the road. Well, we can explain how it works. We can't explain why it works, why, matter hundreds of millions of miles away from other groups of matter warps space-time and causes it to travel in a curved space around it. We don't know. We know that it does that. We can describe it with mathematical precision why it does that. We have no idea, how it does that. We have absolutely no idea why it does that. We have theories, but they are extremely speculative, unproven, and, we have like the string theory and, there's others.
Well, we have general relativity, and we have
general relativity does not say why gravity does what it does. It only explains how gravity does what it does.
I think I'm really having a hard time here, right?
You understand the difference between how and why, right?
I do, except
we can describe every single time a body of X size passes beside a body of Y size, space-time will be curved by a certain sine wave. We can explain that with perfect mathematical precision. We can't say why that happens.
Okay, but the way you're using the term "why" here is throwing me off. Right? There's two ways in which you can ask the question why.
There's no explanation of the sine qua non of gravity other than God.
Correct, but I don't need that in order to understand gravity.
You need that. You need that. No. You need that to understand why gravity is what gravity is.
I don't need it to have faith in gravity.
To get back on the previous course, if I may, what is your big? It sounds like we're dancing around a core issue of faith that you're having. So let's maybe bring that to the surface.
I feel, so recently, this has been kind of a realization, perhaps, is that maybe I'm being too harsh on people that espouse faith, because maybe it's just a semantics game that I'm playing. And maybe that people who say they believe in God or have faith in God really are just saying they hope that God exists, in which case there wouldn't be any disagreement. And so I was trying to see if there could be common ground.
I think that was probably correct, what they should be saying, based on how they're living and thinking. They may say something different, but they may be phrasing that incorrectly.
Okay, but Adam is clearly talking about this very intelligently. He, in the sense that
I take no offense to that.
He is distinguishing faith from hope, and he's saying, no, for me it's faith, and faith is necessarily irrational, and it defies explanation.
It's literally anti-rational and the opposite of reason.
You've said that, right? So, okay, and now, but I don't think that your analogy of gravity at all makes sense in that conception, right? Because gravity,
I shouldn't have even said it. I opened that can of worms. It was my fault.
We don't need to know why gravity is happening.
If we want to have full meaning, we do.
Well, again, this full meaning, partial meaning. I'm okay with partial
Wait, come back to the faith thing. Though. We're going to spend another 10 minutes on gravity. I want to hear where you're going with the faith thing.
That was it.
Okay.
That was it. So it sounds like I've got a kind of a split bag here, right? So you, you mentioned other Christians. You said that based on the way they live, their form of faith is probably closer to hope.
Yeah.
Is that now? You heard Adam say that for him, definitely faith is in a different category. It's in a category all its own. It's not mere hope. It is somewhere between hope and knowledge, and it is entirely irrational. Okay, that's radically different from where I'm trying to find common ground. That would not allow us to find common ground. Are you anywhere closer to my conception of faith as hope? Or are you closer to Adam's conception of faith as something entirely different that is anti-rational?
Well, it's all a matter of semantics, I think. So we might all be kind of talking about the same thing, but my difference for me, the worst thing that Christians ever said to me when I was an atheist, and this would be the beginning of me shredding them, was you just have to have faith. As soon as they said that, man, it was over. And I would just tear them to pieces, because I would say, when you're saying I just have to have faith, that means that there is nothing even venturing anywhere close to a reasonable explanation for this question that I just asked you. And if you have to have a lot of those things stacking up to have a worldview and a belief system, I think you probably need to do a very serious evaluation of what your worldview is, because that means there's a lot of things that can't even come close to making sense. So if I said, for instance, once you become a Christian and you pour water this way, it actually goes up in the air, and you go, well, why? You go, I just have to have, well, I go, well, it doesn't. Every time I pour the water, it keeps going down this way. Things that just don't make any sense whatsoever. The age of the earth thing, I was like, have faith in what? Like, people said that to me, like 6,000 years old, really? You just have to have faith. Well, in what? And then they don't even know. And you can tell this was a big issue for me. Things like that are what keep people not taking the church seriously, if you're going to say things like that. And I get it. Not everyone's a geologist. Totally cool. But know where your domains of expertise are, for crying out loud. If you want to talk to a guy in first grade, and say, hey, the earth is 6,000 years old, who doesn't know anything about anything, that's fine. I would suggest that you don't go out of your domain there. But I've seen people try to convince geologists that the earth is 6,000 years old. And that's just ludicrous to me. And then to come back to this just have to have faith thing, it's like, well, what is your faith centered on? Like, what do you... So for me, I don't want to have look at my Christian faith and go, okay, here's 100 core things I need to make sure I'm pretty well entrenched in. 50 of them, I'm just having faith make sense because I don't understand them at all. I might allow one or two things and hope that I can get closer to making some kind of sense of those. Now, then there's those things you can't possibly make sense of. What is God? Describe God to me. What is heaven like? I mean, there's no way to know. I mean, I've never been there. I can't see it. I can't reason my way around it. So those are the things that I go, I just have faith that might be out there because in the Bible it says it is, but I'm not necessarily preoccupied by it. I'm much more concerned on the things as you've described in this life. I very rarely think about what heaven might be like. Maybe people I'll be there that I love, that I'll miss. I don't know. But if the Bible's right, there's going to be a lot of people that I do love that aren't going to be there. And that's heartbreaking. But I don't think about it. I just think, I am struggling day to day to find purpose and meaning in my life. And if this book is bringing me closer to more moments where I'm getting those things, I'm all in. Unless there's something out there that's coming along and doing a better job than that. And I'd be open to checking that out.
So it's interesting that you keep coming back to the book, right? And Adam seems to be pointedly considering the book, but looking definitely outside of the book, or so anyway, this is a good, I think, place to stop, because I think what I want to do is at some point continue this discussion and talk a little bit more about the Bible and how the Bible plays into your belief systems, your respective belief systems. And I have a bunch of questions based on what the Bible has to say about these things. And so I'm going to be primarily curious about Adam's conception of God based on what the Bible has to say, whether he has any respect for that. And then, of course, your perspective on the inerrancy of the Bible, because I know that's something you've grappled with. And then I'm very curious to know, what can we really know about God if the Bible is not central, if it's not inerrant?
Those are all fantastic questions. But
let me do this. So to close out this segment, Nick, let me go ahead and give you the right word before Adam hits us with his prediction for.
You wanted me to say something?
To come. Yes.
Can I just ask you something?
Sure.
I think about this a lot. I've been thinking about it ever since I first met you. And this isn't a gotcha question. I'm just genuinely curious about this. When I was an atheist, I was driven insane by people that had faith. I was constantly not curious like I feel like you are. I wanted to destroy their faith. I don't know why I did, but I was hell-bent on it. As a Christian, if people ask me about my faith, as you know, I'm more than willing to talk about it, but I don't grapple so much with being so incredibly preoccupied by what other people think as far as their worldview and their esoteric views of things. And I'm curious if there is some sort of overlap between my experience as an atheist and yours, because I feel like you've been on this kind of relentless pursuit for something more, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, and correct me, which I'm sure you will if I'm wrong, something more than your current framework. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, well, I think it's natural to be preoccupied with purpose for man, right? Like that is the central problem for me too. So definitely in that sense, I'm in the same boat. I feel very tangibly that there is some kind of cosmic purpose, and yet it eludes me whenever I think about it for 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not willing to take the leap because I feel like that is acquiescence. That's just giving up. That's just saying, okay, well, I'll take a leap of faith. Okay. Well, you're not really grappling with the issues anymore. The reason it's important for me to grapple with the issues is because I imagine a better future for man, like for humanity. I love people. I want people to be happy. I want them to multiply. I think people are the best thing since sliced bread. There's that part in Watchmen, I brought it up to Adam before, where, did you ever see the movie Watchmen?
I don't think so.
Did you ever read the book, the comic? Okay. So there's a character named Dr. Manhattan, who's this American scientist who gets caught in a lab experiment or whatever and gets disintegrated and then reconstitutes himself as essentially a being akin to God. As powerful as can be. And in fact, there's a line where a guy says God exists and he's American, based on Dr. Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And there's a part where Dr. Manhattan goes and traverses the universe, and he goes from planet to planet, and he observes various geological formations, and he rhetorically asks the question, tell me how this would be improved by the advent of man, And I find that phrase like infuriating, because to me it seems obvious. What do you mean? What does all this bullshit matter if man's not there to appreciate it? Like, who is this for? So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I feel very strongly also that in order for us to have some kind of brighter future while we live here on earth, we have to get on the same page about what's moral, what's right and wrong. And there's all these supposed sources of morality, including, God. But if you can't explain them, if they cannot be palatable to our reason, then you're not really saying anything at all. And that's the part that I find frustrating. I find it, I don't want to say, like, I'm not militant about it, but I do find it a little disrespectful when, again, not like to me personally, but just to man in general, this notion that we don't have to explain ourselves. It's just faith. So you either have it or you don't.
We don't say we don't have to explain ourselves. We say we cannot explain it through the process of reasoning. We've explained ourselves innumerable times to you ad nauseum. The problem is that we can't say that 1 + 1 = God. And that's your problem.
Well, it is the problem of the human mind that is incapable of engaging in
But most human minds are not incapable of it. Unfortunately, Boris Gustave seems to be.
Well, can you there is no human mind that can conceive a contradiction.
Okay, but there are innumerable human minds that have come down from the dawn of man to 2024 that have had faith. You're just not one of them.
And look at us. Look at the disunity. Look at the way that we hurt each other.
I think I just heard you say something, Boris.
The holiest nation on earth, right? Supposedly.
Okay, so we're back to wars are bad, and so faith is not real. Okay, I get it. Hear you.
Well, what I'm saying, what I'm saying is that despite people having faith through the centuries, wars are still happening. So clearly something's not working.
Did anybody ever make the claim that faith would eliminate war? I'm sorry. And by the way, when has non-faith ever eliminated war or prevented war?
To the extent that it can't do that, it is an obstacle to it. And I just explained, that is my preoccupation. I'm less preoccupied with...
if you're going to say that faith equals war... Well, I'm going to say that non-faith is just as warlike as faith.
Would it blow your mind if I said I believe that evil is essential?
You do?
Would it blow your mind if I said that?
Would I believe you if you said
Would it blow your mind?
I think there's actually biblical support for that. You understand that both Jesus and that Satan are referred to in the Bible as the morning star, right?
So you read that. I am aware of that, but I thought that was just different context.
I was just planting a seed for a future.
To me, that is what the poet Blake called the marriage of evil, the marriage of heaven and hell, the marriage of good and evil.
Okay.
Because there could be no evil without good, just like there could be no love without hate. If you eliminated hate from the human experience, you would also eliminate love. If you eliminated evil from the human experience, you would also eliminate good, because they define each other, and to a certain extent, they can't exist without each other. On an absolute rational level, by the way.
Except I know what you mean when you say love and hate. Mm-hmm. And I only sort of know what you mean when you say good and evil. I know what you mean when you say good and bad. I know what you say when you mean right or wrong, so long as we're engaging in any of these concepts, which are binary and which are defined essentially linguistically by their opposite. If you were to successfully eliminate hate, as is supposedly the goal of the progressive movement in the United States and other places, or any other of these binaries, you would simultaneously eliminate its binary opposite, which is love. But okay.
And everybody wants love, right?
Except I'm not trying to eliminate evil. Okay, I don't even know.
I'm not saying you are. The point I'm illustrating is that the existence of one is necessary for the existence of the other.
I was just trying to plant a seed for a future episode subject for you guys, but I've blown it again.
Well, but this is not a bad thing. It's
too big of a. I think it's unless you got another couple hours, man, it may be too big.
War is defined by peace, and peace is defined by war.
Correct. If you could eliminate war, there would be no meaning to the word peace. If you could eliminate peace, there would be no meaning to war. They're two sides of the same coin. Heraclitus. That goes back to Heraclitus, my friend. Well, go back and review Heraclitus.
But love and hate are emotions. Peace and war describe human actions. Eliminating unnecessary and counterproductive actions is not going to hurt us in any way. It's not going to destroy the productive things that we're going to be able to do as a result of eliminating those unproductive actions.
Would you disagree that the political zeitgeist of America of 2024 seems to be focused on eliminating hate?
Thus breeding more of it?
I mean, the progressive movement, aren't they all about stomping out hate? Nobody's allowed to hate anything. Hate is a crime. They're hate crimes, right? I mean, we can't hate anybody ever. We can't have any hatred in this world. Isn't that the whole raison d'etre of the modern progressive left? And yet, if they eliminate that hate, I say to you, there would be no love in this world, and they would not want to do that.
That is complete nonsense, Adam. I'm sorry. I have to disagree there. Look, just because, first of all, I don't know. I don't think you can sum it up like that as far as like the culture.
There would be no conception of love without hate. There would be no conception of right without wrong. There wouldn't be no conception of good without evil. Those are fundamental ontological realities. Those are rational. Those are not based on faith. That is an observation of reality.
I will concede the point regarding love and hate. I will concede the point regarding right and wrong. I will not concede the point regarding good and evil, because I'm not sure how you're using those phrases, and I don't think that they operate in the same way as the first two. Okay. And then I certainly do not accept your juxtaposition of war and peace, and how war is defined by peace and vice versa, because that's human action. That is not emotion. It's a different category of thing entirely. But all right. Let me ask you this, since we're actually on the subject of culture, and this is your forte. Care you to make a prediction for this week, O Cypher Divine?
For this week?
Or whatever, you're the Cypher Divine, not I.
All right, the Cypher Divine says, Alaska will be destroyed, and the third temple will be built.
Nick, anything to say to close this out?
I have no idea what he was talking about or what you're talking about.
All right.
But thanks for having me
hopefully when you listen back, you might have some thoughts that you'd care to share. All right, guys. Well, it's good having you. I really appreciate you coming. And, don't be a stranger, man. We need to.
We have another
whole
episode
half
already
of this
teed up.
conversation to finish off.
Done, Indeed. So. We're literally only got half of it done. So. All right, everybody.
All right, man.
I am the Cypher Divine.
In the way of what you're after, Nuisance Factor, Nuisance Factor, yeah.